When discrepancies arise between bid documents and specification documents, it can create significant challenges for bidders and contractors. Contractors bear the ultimate responsibility for thoroughly reviewing and understanding all bidding documents before submitting their bids. This includes carefully examining both the scope letter and the specification book. If there are any ambiguities or missing details in the bid documents, it is crucial to seek clarification from the project owner or contracting authority before submitting a bid. This helps prevent costly misunderstandings later on. When drawings and specifications contradict each other, the specification generally takes precedence. However, it is important to understand the specific language used and the context of the discrepancies. While it is essential to review all bidding documents meticulously, time constraints can be a challenge. Contractors should prioritize reviewing critical areas first, such as the scope of work, key technical specifications, and any unusual or complex requirements. If the discrepancies impact subcontractors' work, it is important to communicate these issues to them promptly. This ensures that they are aware of any additional requirements that may affect their bids. Contractors should carefully assess the risks associated with bidding on jobs where discrepancies exist between bid documents and specifications. They may consider seeking legal counsel to mitigate potential liabilities. Contractors may choose to include a contingency budget in their bids to accommodate unexpected expenses resulting from discrepancies. They can also consider negotiating with the project owner to clarify or resolve any uncertainties before submitting their bids. Contractors should document their efforts to identify and address any discrepancies. This may include written correspondence, meeting notes, or discussions with the project owner. Completing jobs with discrepancies can negatively impact a contractor's reputation. It is crucial to manage expectations and communicate effectively with the project owner and subcontractors throughout the project. Considering a scenario with equipment grounding in utility vaults, let's discuss specific steps and considerations to navigate these discrepancies. Firstly, examine the contract documents to determine the hierarchy. Typically, specifications will govern over drawings, but the contract should explicitly state this. Secondly, meticulously review the grounding specifications. Identify all specific requirements for grounding racks, pulling irons, manhole lids, and other metallic components within the vaults. Thirdly, document all discrepancies between the drawings and specifications. For example, note that the drawings show a single 1/0 ground wire, while the specifications require extensive grounding of all metallic components. Fourthly, submit a request for information or RFI to the project owner or engineer. Clearly outline the discrepancies and request clarification on the required grounding method. For example, the RFI could ask, does the single 1/0 ground wire shown in the drawing satisfy the grounding requirements outlined in the specifications for all metallic components within the vault? Fifthly, consider a preliminary cost estimate for both scenarios. Firstly, estimate the cost of grounding the vaults as shown in the drawings, which includes the 1/0 ground wire in connection to the ground bus. Secondly, estimate the cost of grounding all metallic components within the vaults as required by the specifications, including additional materials and labor. Sixthly, include a contingency in your bid to cover the potential additional costs. Base the contingency on the high cost estimate if the RFI response is unclear or if the owner insists on strict adherence to the specifications. Seventhly, clearly communicate the potential cost impact to the general contractor. Explain that the grounding requirements outlined in the specifications could significantly increase the cost of the electrical work. Eighthly, if the owner provides clarification that reduces the scope of grounding, obtain written confirmation. This will protect you from future claims for additional work. Ninthly, during the project, maintain detailed records of all grounding work performed. This includes photographs, material receipt, and labor hours. Tenthly, if the owner directs you to perform additional grounding work beyond what was originally shown in the drawings, submit a change order request for additional compensation. This should include a detailed breakdown of the additional costs. Remember that it is better to identify and address these discrepancies before the bid is submitted, if possible. However, when time is limited, these steps can help manage the risk and protect your interests throughout the project. Let's delve deeper into the contractor's responsibility. The contractor has a duty to perform a reasonable review of the contract document. This includes the drawings, specifications, and any addenda. A reasonable review means looking for obvious discrepancies and inconsistencies. However, a contractor is not typically expected to be a detective and uncover hidden ambiguities. The contractor's responsibility also extends to seeking clarification when something is unclear. If the contractor notices a discrepancy, they should submit an RFI to the owner or engineer. The RFI should clearly explain the discrepancy and ask for direction on how to proceed. Failing to seek clarification can be seen as accepting the risk of interpreting the ambiguous language incorrectly. Now, let's discuss the precedence of drawings versus specifications. Generally, the specifications will govern over the drawings. This is because the specifications are more detailed and specific. However, the contract documents may specify a different order of precedence. For example, the contract may state that addenda govern over specifications and specifications govern over drawings. It is important to carefully review the contract documents to determine the order of precedence. If there is a conflict between the drawings and specifications, the contractor should follow the specifications unless otherwise directed by the owner or engineer. Now, let's address the challenge of time constraints. Bidding a large project can be a very time-consuming process. It is important to prioritize your time and focus on the most critical aspects of the project. Firstly, review the scope of work to understand the overall project requirements. Secondly, review the key technical specifications, such as those related to grounding, wiring, and equipment installation. Thirdly, review the drawings to identify any potential constructability issues. Fourthly, attend the pre-bid meeting to ask questions and clarify any uncertainties. Fifthly, if time is limited, focus on the areas where the most significant discrepancies or ambiguities exist. It is better to identify and address a few key issues than to try to review every detail of the contract documents. Now let's discuss subcontractor coordination. If the discrepancies impact the work of your subcontractors, it is important to communicate these issues to them promptly. Provide your subcontractors with copies of the relevant contract documents and explain the discrepancies. Ask your subcontractors to review the documents and provide their input on how to address the issues. Obtain quotes from your subcontractors that reflect the potential additional costs associated with the discrepancies. Include these costs in your overall bid. Now let's talk about risk assessment. Bidding on a project with significant discrepancies involves inherent risks. It is important to carefully assess these risks before submitting your bid. Firstly, consider the potential cost impact of the discrepancies. Secondly, consider the potential schedule impact of the discrepancies. Thirdly, consider the potential for disputes with the owner or engineer. Fourthly, consider the potential for claims from your subcontractors. Fifthly, based on your assessment, decide whether to bid on the project and how to price your bid to account for the risks. Now, let's explore bidding strategies. There are several strategies that you can use to address discrepancies in your bid. Firstly, include a contingency in your bid to cover the potential additional costs associated with the discrepancies. Secondly, submit a qualified bid that clearly identifies the discrepancies and explains how you have priced your bid to account for them. Thirdly, negotiate with the owner or engineer to clarify or resolve the discrepancies before submitting your bid. Fourthly, if the discrepancies are too significant or the risks are too high, decline to bid on the project. Now let's consider protecting your interests. It is important to document all of your efforts to identify and address discrepancies. This documentation can be used to support claims for additional compensation or to defend against claims from the owner or engineer. Firstly, keep copies of all RFI that you submit. Secondly, keep copies of all responses that you receive from the owner or engineer. Thirdly, keep detailed meeting notes of all discussions with the owner, engineer, and subcontractors. Fourthly, keep copies of all change order requests that you submit. Fifthly, keep detailed records of all work that you perform, including photographs, material receipts, and labor hires. Now let's discuss reputation management. Completing a project with significant discrepancies can be challenging. It is important to manage expectations and communicate effectively with the owner, engineer, and subcontractors. Firstly, be transparent about the potential for additional costs and schedule delays. Secondly, keep the owner and engineer informed of your progress and any challenges that you encounter. Thirdly, work collaboratively with the owner, engineer, and subcontractors to find solutions to the discrepancies. Fourthly, maintain a professional and respectful attitude throughout the project. Fifthly, if disputes arise, attempt to resolve them amicably through negotiation or mediation. Finally, remember that your reputation is your most valuable asset. A successful project, even with discrepancies, can enhance your reputation and lead to future opportunities. Now, let's apply these principles to the specific example of grounding utility vaults. The drawings show a single 1/0 ground wire, while the specifications require grounding of all metallic components. This is a significant discrepancy that could have a substantial cost impact. Firstly, submit an RFI to the owner or engineer asking for clarification on the required grounding method. Secondly, obtain quotes from your subcontractors for both the single ground wire and the grounding of all metallic components. Thirdly, include a contingency in your bid to cover the potential additional costs. Fourthly, clearly communicate the potential cost impact to the general contractor. Fifthly, if the owner directs you to ground all metallic components, submit a change order request for additional compensation. By following these steps, you can manage the risk associated with the grounding discrepancy and protect your interests. In addition to these steps, it is important to be aware of any relevant industry standards or best practices for grounding utility vaults. For example, the National Electrical Code or NEC provides specific requirements for grounding and bonding electrical systems. You should also consult with qualified engineers or consultants to ensure that your grounding design meets all applicable requirements. Furthermore, consider the long-term maintenance and reliability of the grounding system. Use high-quality materials and installation methods to ensure that the grounding system will perform effectively for the life of the vault. Regularly inspect and test the grounding system to identify and address any potential problems. By taking a proactive approach to grounding, you can minimize the risk of electrical hazards and ensure the safety of personnel and equipment. Remember that effective communication is key to successfully navigating discrepancies in contract documents. Keep all stakeholders informed of the issues and work collaboratively to find solutions. By following these guidelines, contractors can minimize the risks associated with bidding on projects where discrepancies exist between bid documents and specifications. This proactive approach protects both the contractor's financial interests and reputation while fostering positive working relationships with all parties involved in the project. Navigating these challenges requires a combination of diligence, clear communication, and a strategic approach to risk management. Always prioritize thorough review and documentation to protect your company's interests and ensure project success.